Welcome back. Honestman, here to talk Final Fantasy X Endgame. Final Fantasy X is one of my all-time favorite games, and if you haven't played it since its original release, I would strongly recommend revisiting it in the form of the international version, or, as it's been more recently dubbed, the quote-unquote HD remaster, which is available on all major gaming platforms. If you're a completionist like me, you maybe found yourself disappointed in the endgame content in Final Fantasy X, and that's precisely what the updated version addresses. If you thought that Nemesis was a cakewalk, the remaster adds a suite of dark aeons to provide a tier of challenge above that of the monster arena, including a new super boss named Penance. I'll also note that Quick Hit got a big nerf because it was extremely fast in the original release. All of this together means that there's some real payoff for completionists and min-maxers. So if that's you, I think it's worth your time. All of that said, Final Fantasy X is over 20 years old, and even the original Japanese international version is also over 20 years old. So why am I digging it up again? Well, as I said earlier, it's one of my all-time favorite games, and more generally, I consider it a classic. Anyone who's into RPGs, I think Final Fantasy X withstands the test of time and remains one of the best RPGs ever made. More to the point though, I find myself disappointed in the level of discourse and analysis for a game of such renown. So, without further ado, this is where I'm going to start throwing some punches. When it comes to endgame armor, there are a lot of prominent websites, which shall remain nameless, dishing up some truly awful information. Those sources would have you believe, for example, that Auto Phoenix is excellent and Break HP Limit is bad. At best, that is a subjective opinion, so allow me to provide my own subjective opinion based on probably 1,000 hours of total playtime, which is that Auto Phoenix is stupid and for babies, and Break HP Limit is the superior ability, and it isn't even close. Now, before I dive deeper on Auto Phoenix and Break HP Limit, let's round out the rest of our armor abilities. We max out at 4 abilities total, so regardless of Phoenix versus HP, which I think should be considered mutually exclusive options, we have 3 other abilities at our disposal. I don't think there's really much debate on those 3 abilities. There are definitely some niche strategies out there, and if we were talking about making different armors for specific enemies, then there could certainly be a whole bunch of different variations. That said, I don't think making enemy-specific armors makes sense, which is to say that the cost of doing that, both in terms of in-game items and in terms of real-world grinding time, aren't really worth it, because at the end of the day, you don't need enemy-specific armors. It's just unnecessary. Now, if crafting a suit of different armors, for situations and enemies is fun for you, then by all means, you do you. Your fun is not wrong. However, for the purpose of this conversation, I'm talking about a single, all-purpose, ultimate armor. And within that context, I think we can safely pencil in Auto Haste, Auto Protect, and Ribbon. Auto Haste is a complete no-brainer. Just like with virtually every turn-based RPG in existence, maximizing turn economy is the name of the game. And Haste effectively increases the number of turns your characters are taking relative to the enemy. Auto Haste also effectively negates the slow status ailment. You're not going to find any serious arguments against Auto Haste. I think Auto Protect also has broad consensus. Obviously, this only works against physical attacks, not magical attacks, but physical attacks are prominently featured by the strongest enemies in the game, and there's absolutely no downside to the Protect effect. Shell, on the other hand, reduces the effectiveness of all incoming magic, both black magic and white magic, which means it lowers the effectiveness of healing magics. So there are some situational drawbacks to Shell. Regardless, even if we're only looking at upside and ignoring downside, Protect is nevertheless a better value compared to Shell, and compared to other protective options in the broader context of having a single, all-purpose armor. Finally, Ribbon is an armor ability that was added with the international remaster versions. In classic Final Fantasy style, Ribbon protects against almost all status ailments. There is a caveat here, however, in that Ribbon does not protect against curse, instant death, or various break effects like armor break. That said, it still protects you against petrify, confusion, berserk, zombie, poison, sleep, silence, and blind. And those are highly relevant status protections in the endgame. Now, there is an argument to be made that Ribbon does not provide value against penance. And if someone can make the argument that something doesn't provide value against the ultimate enemy, then they could also argue that there's no place for it on a quote-unquote ultimate armor. That said, I think when we look at Endgame in its totality, which is to say all of the Dark Aeons and the top-end monster arena fights, I still favor Ribbon for an all-purpose armor. Honorable mention, however, to auto-regen, which could be a tempting option in this spot. So with that as the foundation, let's take a deeper dive on the objective pros and cons of Auto Phoenix and Break HP Limit, and perhaps more importantly, how those pros and cons overlap with the enemies that you'll be facing. Now, to clarify some terms here, Break HP Limit simply increases your maximum hit point cap from 9,999 to 99,999. So it enables you to build your characters with 10 times as much HP. Very straightforward. Auto Phoenix is a bit more intricate. Auto Phoenix is an ability that causes your character to automatically revive a downed ally with a Phoenix Down. Phoenix Down being a consumable item that will revive one character from KO. So if you have Auto Phoenix on all 3 of your active party members, and one of them is struck down by an attack, one of the surviving 2 party members will toss a Phoenix Down to bring them back up without expending a turn. It happens in reaction to the ally going down. This also works in cases where 2 of the 3 active party members go down, and you have 1 surviving party member with Auto Phoenix. The survivor will bring both downed allies back up automatically by expending Phoenix Downs. That probably sounds strong. That probably sounds like you might be invincible if everyone has Auto Phoenix. And situationally, it can be extremely strong. The problems begin when we consider a situation where all 3 active party members go down at the same time. Then it's game over. That's problem number 1. And to be clear, this is not a contrived hypothetical. Enemies in the monster arena, as well as Dark Aeons, will use group attacks that can easily exceed 10,000 damage, even when you have maximum magic defense and defense, which would be 255 for each of those stats. Someone might then say, oh, you can cast Auto Life in those cases, and in most of those cases, Auto Life will in fact save you. The problem is that you're then wasting a turn, potentially multiple turns, doing nothing other than casting Auto Life. Compare that to a scenario where you have enough hit points to just tank the attack, and you're not wasting any turns casting Auto Life. In that case, it's clearly more efficient to tank the attack and not lose any turns on actions that aren't doing damage to the enemy. Now, to be fair, Break HP Limit doesn't save you in all of those cases, but it definitely does save you in some of them compared to Auto Phoenix. Concrete examples are plentiful. For example, with 100,000 hit points, you can easily just straight up eat Dark Bahamut's Mega Flare, Dark Yojimbo's group Wakazashi attack, and Nemesis's Ultra Spark. I'll also note that you can tank Dark Anima's Oblivion attack. You're not going to have much left afterward, but you can do it. So when it comes to group attacks, I think the objective analysis favors Break HP Limit. And that brings us to the broader problem with Auto Phoenix, which is turn economy. When a character goes down and is subsequently revived, whether it's through Auto Phoenix or some other means, they're removed and then re-added to the turn order. This is a net loss in turn economy. Even in the best case scenario of the character being immediately revived, which would be the case for either Auto Phoenix or Auto Life, there's a delay. There's a penalty in the turn order. Now, if we're talking about infrequent deaths, it maybe doesn't add up to much in the final analysis. But when your party members are constantly going down, it's a snowball effect. Every time someone goes down, your team is getting fewer and fewer turns relative to the enemy. And then the enemy is continuing to down your party members whenever they act. So it really behooves you to avoid dying. That's basically the crux of my argument against Auto Phoenix. It's fundamentally a strategy that's playing to lose. And in doing so, you're paying a tax in the form of turn economy, and you're thereby falling behind strategies that play to win, which is to say strategies that use that ability slot to try to mitigate the likelihood and or frequency of death in the first place. Tongue-in-cheek, I'll also note that any self-respecting RPG player knows that consumables aren't for using, they're for hoarding. You just put those items into your inventory and you don't ever use them. It isn't natural to implement a strategy that relies on using consumables, especially when you can only carry a maximum of 99 of each item. Now, as critical as I am of Auto Phoenix, I need to give it its due. First and foremost, I want to put a punctuation mark on the fact that this analysis is focused on the remaster version of the game. If we were talking about the original base game where Nemesis is the king of the hill, then this would all be completely academic. In the original game, the level of challenge from the top-end enemies does not warrant this level of scrutiny. Just use whatever you want. You're going to quick hit Nemesis into the dirt. The Dark Aeons and Penance, however, are where the old assumptions and old strategies break down. So, trying to be as generous as possible, I have to think that some of the questionable analysis that I'm seeing online is just carryover and or copy-paste from the original release. The case for Auto Phoenix over Break HP Limit was much stronger when Quick Hit was twice as fast and Nemesis was the strongest boss. In addition, regardless of version, I think the space where Auto Phoenix really excels is within the context of an NSG game. NSG stands for No Sphere Grid, which is sort of a challenge for experienced players whereby you're not allowed to use the sphere grid at all. So whatever stats and abilities your characters start with, that's all they ever get. Obviously, with that sort of challenge, Break HP Limit is completely meaningless because you can't increase your character's hit points beyond what they start with. So when we are talking about an NSG playthrough, I think the best armor is definitely Auto Phoenix, Auto Haste, Auto Regen, and Ribbon. In any case, I hope that provides a working framework of both the benefits and drawbacks of Auto Phoenix. When it comes to Break HP Limit, the benefits should be self-evident. If you have 10 times the HP pool, you can theoretically survive 10 times the attacks compared to baseline. This is particularly true when enemy damage is capped at 9,999 damage. Quantifying the value of that bigger HP pool gets more difficult when enemy attacks can do 5 digits of damage, which is true for most of the enemies that we'd actually care about here, to be fair. But in the vast majority of cases, you're surviving at least one additional hit, and very frequently, you're increasing your survivability several hits over baseline. So that sounds great to me. What are the downsides? Well, there's a particularly idiotic criticism out there which says that it can be difficult to heal with that many hit points. To be clear, that's a true statement. It can be difficult to heal that much HP because the cure spells aren't strong enough to heal 100,000 hit points. Not even close. It's idiotic though because you shouldn't be wasting turns casting heals regardless of whether or not you're using Break HP Limit. This is pretty basic action economy in my book. You want to maximize the number of turns when you're doing damage and minimize the number of turns when you're not. Now, having someone die is potentially worse than spending a turn to heal in terms of action economy, But once again, this is very often a false choice. The comparison isn't die and be brought back automatically with Auto Phoenix versus die and have to spend a turn to get someone back up, so you should heal to prevent that. The comparison is actually die and be brought back automatically with Auto Phoenix versus don't die at all, just tank the hit. So at a high level, the criticism is rooted in a false premise, which is that you'd be healing to prevent death. The way this actually plays out is instead of dying and suffering the penalty to action economy from having people dropping, presuming we're using Auto Phoenix to bring them back up here, you'd instead have 10 times the hit points. You're able to take 10 times the damage before you drop, which means you're receiving somewhere between 2 times and 10 times the number of attacks before going down. But then what happens when you go down? The answer is you cast Full Life. Full Life will heal your entire 100,000 hit point pool. Obviously, you have to burn a turn to do that, and you're also suffering the penalty to action economy from having someone go down. So you'd want to try to avoid that circumstance as much as possible by utilizing all of your characters, rotate your fighters in and out as needed, and try to minimize incoming damage. Anecdotally, I would argue that the vast majority of cases clearly favor break HP limit because you wouldn't be dying at all. In terms of an objective measuring stick though, I think the magic number is how many turns is the enemy getting when you're using one strategy compared to another. Because the number of enemy turns is a direct measure of your own team's damage throughput. And your team's damage throughput is driven by how well you're managing your action economy. So whichever approach results in fewer turns for the enemy would objectively be the more efficient approach. Now, in the interest of not strawmanning the argument, I think part of the quote-unquote healing criticism could come from a perspective of how certain celestial weapons work. Celestial weapons being the strongest weapons in the game. For Titus, Waka, Riku, and Kamari, their respective celestial weapons are strongest when the corresponding character is at 100% hit points. So low HP percentage means a relatively low damage multiplier. But the problem with this criticism/concern is that it's only actually an issue during a very specific phase of character development. Once you have max strength and you've made appropriate investments into luck, those characters should be hitting for max damage in all but the absolute lowest HP ranges. I'm talking about less than 10% of max. So keeping hit points topped off for the sake of maximizing weapon damage, I think, is mostly a moot point. If one of those 4 characters is holding on by a thread such that they aren't doing max damage against something, you should be cycling them out anyway because they're about to die, or you should be considering biting the bullet on letting them drop and then casting Full Life. That should be extremely rare, however, since we'd want to avoid death as much as possible, and quite frankly, when you have 10 times as much HP to work with, you should be able to outlast almost everything. The best criticism against break HP limit is probably the argument against the time it takes to farm your hit points to the higher maximum. Now, the amount of farming is definitely not 0, so the criticism is valid. That said, it really shouldn't be that big of a time investment for several reasons. The first reason is because there's plenty of space on the standard sphere grid for everything that you need, without deleting any of the 200 hit point spheres, which would otherwise cost a chunk of time. But let's talk details for a minute, and then we'll circle back to HP spheres. What do you need on your sphere grid? The biggest culture shock for folks coming from the original release of the game is that you need the luck stat. If you don't invest in luck, you're not going to be able to hit half of the Dark Aeons. I don't care how high your accuracy stat is, it's not good enough. So you need luck. How much? The answer is that you can skate by with 100 luck. That's enough to consistently hit almost everything, completely regardless of your accuracy score. That's not hyperbole. You literally don't need any accuracy nodes if you have enough luck. As I said, 100 luck is enough to skate by, but you're going to have a lot of problems hitting Dark Sandy and Dark Mindy. You might also miss some crits against Penance. The next tier up is 110 luck. That's enough to guarantee critical hits against Penance, but you'll still struggle to hit Sandy and Mindy. The next real tier after that is approximately 180 luck. At that point, only Dark Mindy will provide problems, but you should be at approximately a 70% hit rate. 200 luck would provide consistent hits against Mindy, with only rare misses. All of that said, Dark Mindy only has 2 million hit points, and you can get through her just relying on overdrives and Aeons. And you can also fight the Dark Mega Sisters individually. You don't have to fight them all at the same time. So all in all, I think the sweet spot for luck is around 120. That'll make Dark Sandy more manageable. You'll have 100% crit against Penance, and 100% hit against Dark Yojimbo. More on him later. An additional 60 to 80 luck, just to make Dark Mindy a little easier, isn't worth it, in my opinion. So let's pencil in 120 luck, which would be around 29 luck spheres, at +4 each. As I just mentioned, you don't need accuracy after that. You can literally delete all of the accuracy nodes. Luck also has an interaction with evasion. Unlike accuracy, evasion does retain some value even when you have high luck. That said, by the time you get to this point in the game, I would argue that the value of evasion is basically 0. So if you're OCD and you have to fill in the entire sphere grid, then I'd suggest plugging empty spaces with evasion after everything else is done. Otherwise, at minimum, I'd delete all evasion spheres that are less than +4 and replace them with something else. Speaking of the something else, you're going to want to max strength, defense, and magic defense. Maximum means 255, as we can see here, which means approximately 60 +4 spheres per stat. Magic is mostly useless in the endgame, but it absolutely does help most of your Aeon overdrives, and there's plenty of space anyway, so you can max magic if you like. I'd also max MP at 999. When it comes to agility, there are strong arguments that 170 is the functional max. That said, Yuna's agility does not scale 1-to-1 with the agility of her Aeons. In fact, when Yuna has 255 agility, Ixion is below 170. He'll probably be in the 150, 160 range, give or take. And then obviously, if Yuna only has 170, your other Aeons would be slower as well. Now, someone might argue that Aeons just aren't important enough to worry about, and I am sympathetic to that argument, but I still fall on the side of maximizing agility because it's extremely easy to farm agility spheres, and because I do think that Aeon agility is important enough through much of the endgame. If you disagree, just aim for 170 and be done. I'm going to pencil in max agility for the sake of Yuna's Aeons, and if I'm putting down agility spheres for her, I may as well level everyone else as well. For all of these stats, I hope it goes without saying, but you'll want to delete any stat sphere less than a +4. In the case of MP, you only want the +40 spheres. Delete the +20s. And that brings us back to hit points. With the assumptions that I just laid out, which were maximum strength, defense, magic, magic defense, agility, and MP, as well as 120 luck, and basically 0, if not literally 0, accuracy and evasion spheres, you still have enough room on the sphere grid to max HP without removing any of the 200 HP spheres. So just keep those in place and augment with the 300 HP spheres that you get from Ironclad. That means we'd need to collect approximately 268 HP spheres. You should pick up around 9 in the process of going through the game. So we can safely round that down, I think, to 260, just to give us a nice round number. In addition, assuming we get an overkill when we kill Ironclad, which should always be the case, you'd get 2 spheres per kill, which means you'd need approximately 130 kills. Now, you should be able to kill Ironclad 100% repeatable in approximately 77 seconds. That includes all of the menu time to cycle back into a subsequent kill. 77 seconds times 130 kills is less than 3 hours of farming. That wouldn't be consecutive since you can only hold a maximum of 99 HP spheres in your inventory, and you'd be farming power spheres, but caveats aside, that's the time investment that we're talking about here, and that's what people complain about. It's under 3 hours of farming. To be fair, a lot of people don't understand how to kill Ironclad that fast, but that's what I'm here for. Before I jump into the demonstration though, the bigger picture here is that you have to build your character stats in the correct order. That's where people screw this up. If you don't have enough strength, Ironclad is going to be a pain. If you have too much defense, too much HP, too much luck, and or too much evasion, Ironclad is going to be a pain. That's the killer. You can very easily become too powerful to kill Ironclad quickly. It's a little counterintuitive, but it's true. The correct order for farming spheres, which isn't necessarily the best order for actually developing your characters, there's a subtle distinction there, but the best order for farming spheres is magic defense first. You're going to want magic defense prior to farming fortune spheres because of Earth Eater's flare attack, but the reason magic defense is first overall is because One Eye here drops weapons with triple AP. So as soon as you unlock and are able to start farming One Eye, do it because of the triple AP weapons. That will most likely mean using Anima because your characters won't be strong enough to kill One Eye that early. But get those 3-slot triple AP weapons, and then jump on the Don Tomberry rocket ship for sphere levels. That's really the goal, but in the process of farming those weapons, you'll collect magic defense spheres. And here you can see my collection of triple AP weapons on one of my playthroughs. You want to add Overdrive AP to all of them. Triple Overdrive would be great, but it's far too costly at this point in the game. So instead, you should have the ingredients to put Double Overdrive on Yuna, Lulu, and Kamari, and SOS Overdrive on the other 4. That's more than good enough for power leveling. Understand that part of this puzzle, however, is for Don Tomberry's Karma attack to do a ton of damage. In order for that to happen, the character attacking him has to have a lot of kills. All of this is to say that when you're doing your monster capturing, don't spread it out across your whole team. Focus on just a couple of characters to get the majority of the kills, and then use those characters as your engine for power leveling sphere levels with Don Tomberry. Specifically, put Death Strike on Titus's capture weapon as soon as you open up the arena. Then, once you have the airship, capture one of everything from Jose so that you get the 99 Petrify Grenade reward, and then use those to put Stone Strike on Waka's capture weapon. Then those two get all of your capture kills, which means they'll take a ton of damage from Don Tomberry, making it very easy to power level your team. All of that said, once you have your triple AP weapons and magic defense spheres, strength is the next priority because you need strength to kill Ironclad. Unlike magic defense, which you'll primarily want to stockpile, you want to collect and use strength spheres in order to max strength on Waka and Titus. Third in the list is HP. You're going to want to farm and put down approximately 160 HP nodes, and then stockpile 99 additional HP spheres in your inventory for later. Fourth is luck, which means you want to actually put down and use the magic defense spheres that you collected earlier. That'll make your Earth Eater kills faster. push luck to around 120 on at least 3 fighters to start. That luck is going to help you farm agility, which is 5th in the list. Defense is last. MP is fine to do at any time, but I'd wait until you have access to clear spheres before putting them all down onto the sphere grid. Otherwise, you might not have room to put down the 160 HP spheres that you need to drop as part of farming Ironclad. Magic, if you care to do it, should be sometime after agility because you'll want anima to be as fast as possible. So in summary, that's magic defense, strength, HP, luck, agility, defense. With that framework in place, let's talk Ironclad. Riku is the linchpin of our strategy. When I cautioned against luck, defense, HP, and evasion being too high, she's the one that I was talking about. Now, if you're on schedule for late game, you should be farming before anyone is even close to finishing the sphere grid. If I had to put a percentage to it, I'd say your characters should be approximately 50% done with the grid, give or take. So, depending on how you routed Riku after finishing her section of the grid, it might be a moot point. And here we can see that Riku is probably less than 50% on this particular save file here. You get her later than some of the other characters, so part of that makes sense, and part of it is just me slow playing her a little bit. But either way, this is where she's at in this particular playthrough, just as an example. The important part is that you want her defense and HP to be relatively low. That might mean she begins skipping defense spheres at some point. Specifically, I'd keep her defense below 30, and I'd keep her HP under 7,000. I don't know the exact cutoffs, but I can tell you that this strategy works with 29 defense and 6,260 HP. That's from a different file. I'm a bit under that on this save file. And that's low enough for Riku to receive a full overdrive meter using Stoic from Ironclad's counterattack. All of that said, the appropriate conditions have been met for our demo, and we are ready to farm Ironclad. We have celestial weapons and close to max strength for Titus and Wakka. Riku has appropriate defense and hit points, and a full overdrive meter. She's set to Stoic. The boys are both set to Comrade. I also have a first strike weapon on Riku just to help ensure that her turn is first before the boys. Initiative isn't really necessary here. We don't actually want a preemptive attack, but we do want to avoid being ambushed. So I do recommend initiative for that reason. So jumping into our demo here, I did do a clear already just to prime the pump, as it were. So 2 of our characters, Titus and Riku, are going to be at 1 hit point, which is by design. I want to illustrate that you can repeat this so you don't have to hit the save sphere and heal in between kills. So we can start our clocks any second here, and I'm just going to go as fast as I can. Riku is going to mix up a frag grenade to inflict armor break. And there's a lot of different recipes for frag grenade. You can use power, speed, mana, or ability spheres. I like ability spheres just because they're the least useful, but whatever you like. So that's how I got that mix. I did 2 ability spheres, and obviously that counterattack he did refilled Riku because her meter is set to Stoic, and it also filled Wakka and Titus since they are set to Comrade. As long as we're dealing max damage, we don't need that last hit from Titus. So I let those 2 seconds expire just to sort of a proof, a worst case scenario. Otherwise that would hypothetically shave some time. And then Wakka cleans up with some attack reels. And there we go. And then right back into the menu, and boom boom, cycle repeats. So that's how we farm HP spheres. In terms of the broader strategy of farming our ultimate armor, you can begin that process relatively early if you have the patience to farm Dark Veil 4. That's not required, but I'd recommend it because he's much weaker than the other Dark Aeons, and you should be able to get your first 4-slot armor that has break HP limit and ribbon. Obviously, this is at the mercy of the random drop generator, so your mileage may vary, but for what it's worth, anecdotally, I generally have a decent time getting a drop from Dark Velfor, which was the genesis of this piece of armor right here in the save file that I just demonstrated with. If you're pushing the envelope really early, then you'll want to plan to use Anima's Oblivion Overdrive as well as attack reels, and possibly some additional overdrives and or Aeons to kill Dark Velfor. If you wait until a bit later in the leveling process, then a single max damage attack reels should be enough for a kill. Unfortunately, Dark Velfor isn't a repeatable fight, so you'll have to reload if you don't get a good drop. Contrast that with farming Dark Yojimbo, which actually is a proper farming situation and that you can beat him over and over again, accumulating materials in the process, dark matter in particular. The upside of Dark Velfor, however, is that you can kill him way earlier than Dark Yojimbo. So you can hypothetically get one of your 7 armors that you need, and then use the 99 dark matter that you get from capturing monsters for the monster arena to create a second armor. My approach is to get an armor from Dark Velfor, and if that armor isn't for a Yuna, then use the monster arena prize to make an armor for Yuna from scratch. After that, once you have max strength, the second fight against Dark Ixion is a great opportunity to get another armor. It's possible that you could get a lucky drop from any of the Dark Aeons, so certainly give it a shot when you're strong enough, but Dark Yojimbo will be the primary farming target. As I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to make one armor from scratch using the Monster Arena prizes. In addition, you'll accumulate enough dark matter from farming spheres in the Monster Arena and from farming Dark Yojimbo to create a second armor, which means you'll want to get 5 drops total and probably at least 3 from Dark Yojimbo to get armor for everyone in the game. In a worst case scenario, you might go all the way to having to create a third armor from scratch, but I feel like that's relatively uncommon. I usually have better luck with drops. And a tip here is that equipment drops are sometimes, not all of the time, but sometimes directly determined by the character that lands the killing blow. So if you want armor for Waka, you can skew the odds in your favor by having Waka land the final blow. Again, it's not a 100% thing, but with a big enough sample size, I think you'll see that same pattern bear itself out. And that's going to do it for now. Be sure to check out the video description for the cliff notes on what we covered in this episode. And then next episode, I'll be back with my fully powered team to showcase the fight against Penance. Until then, thank you all so much. Please like and subscribe. This has been Honestman, and I will see you next time with more Final Fantasy X.